very valuable to build your dream, because if you're not, you're building someone else's. And it's exciting, it's rewarding. You can create your dream culture. You can dream big. And even when you dream big, maybe you don't accomplish your ultimate goal, but you're going to get pretty close. And then you win because you know it's been on your terms.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs. I am so excited. We have a very special guest today. We have Liz Elting. Liz is an entrepreneur. She's also a philanthropist, and she's also one of Forbes Richest Self-Made Women. And she is the living embodiment of this concept. And Liz actually has a new book that's releasing through Wiley on September 26, 2023 called Dream Big and Win, translating passion into purpose and creating a billion-dollar business. And today we're going to talk about some of the topics in her book. We're going to talk about counterintuitive approaches to success. And we're also going to talk about practical and inspiring tips that you can implement in your business so that you don't only just dream big, but you also win big. So please join me today in welcoming Liz into our platform. Hey, Liz, how are you doing today?
Hi, Suzanne. I'm doing great. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, congratulations on your new book that's coming out.
Thank you. Thank you.
So first of all, tell us a little bit about this book, what inspired you to write this book, and then we'll dive into some key concepts in it.
Sure. Well, I was inspired to write this book because it's the book I wish I had had when I was in my 20s and I was starting off in the business world. I actually tried to find every business book I could get my hands on, and I did end up reading quite a few books, but most of them were very much how to do this, do that, do this, do that, on what goes right. But I wanted something more personal, more vulnerable, more authentic, more entertaining, based on what the entrepreneur or the business person did right and what they did wrong. And so that's what I tried to do with my book. And it's a business book, beach read, and it's my story with all of the lessons I learned along the way.
Exciting. Now you've got some counterintuitive thoughts in that, I know a lot of times, people are looking for that next big invention and that next big product idea. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on entrepreneurs, but your thoughts are that, first of all, innovation is not the same as invention, and you don't have to bring a new shiny object to market. So let's talk about that innovation versus invention. And let's talk about not having to create something new to be successful.
Yes, Suzanne, exactly as you say. You do not need to create something entirely new to be wildly successful. It's so important not to confuse being an entrepreneur with being an inventor, because I wasn't. I know in my experience, I couldn't think of some brand new idea. I remember in business school, people would come to our events and they'd say, oh, for my entrepreneurship class, I need to think of a brand new idea, something that hasn't been done. And I thought, wow, I would have trouble with that. I don't, know what that could be. So what I did was I worked at another company, another translation company for 3 years between college and grad school, learned the industry, loved the industry, but I saw a real gap between what clients needed and what was available in the industry. I thought, we can do this better. And that was what was behind my starting my company. And I will even say at the time when I started, there were 10,000 other translation companies out there. So this was back in 1992. And there were largely moms and pops. And I thought, we need a real world-class, top-tier language solutions company along the lines of a top investment bank or law firm. And that's what I was trying to create with our company. But again, it's doing something that's already being done and doing it differently and better. Basically, finding a problem that's out there and coming up with a solution.
I love it. People are like looking at AI, and I think a lot of us are feeling intimidated. Some of the things are easy, like, okay, write me some copy. But, a lot of us are like, well, it's going to get bigger than writing copy, right? It's going to be writing code. It's going to be creating new programs. And the reality, sometimes we just need to get grounded, and, maybe we can find success still in other things, right? That don't require us to reinvent the wheel from that standpoint.
You're absolutely right, Suzanne. It's really just about doing it better and being, more. I actually listened to one of your podcasts where you were talking about, detail oriented, top service, things that sound so intuitive and, like we all should be doing them, but there's always room to do things better. And, again, better, more detail oriented, better service, as I said, or customizing for your client, or having an office right near them. I mean, there are all different ways to do what's being done better.
You're right. And I think too, like with the invention of AI, that human touch is going to become even more important, right? Because, people are going to crave that, right? Just like what we saw during the COVID era when people couldn't talk to each other, right? That craving of interaction became more important. And now you see like the conferences that are taking off, that those in-person events. So definitely there are ways of still innovating and creating better.
Oh, yes. And I couldn't agree with you more, because that was one of our big differentiators when we started and through the whole time I was with my company, the whole 26 years. It was the idea of spoiling the client with service, that human touch. And of course, now with technology, there's more of an issue with that than ever, where people are avoiding the human touch. But even back in the day, always making sure a human being answered the phone, or making sure you're meeting with your clients in person, even though, of course, you can communicate with them by email. I mean, things that seem so basic, but aren't being done nearly as much as clients want or customers want. And I think that is more important than ever, given that so much can be done, by AI or by technology. The companies that are going to win are the ones that are spoiling the client with personalized service and the human touch. Yes.
Exactly. Going counter, I guess, what everybody else is doing definitely is going to be important to that. And I know we
Yes.
had to
Oh, go ahead. Go
debate
ahead.
that, in terms of our company, going to that PBX where you've got like a automated auto attendant, or having a person answer. And, we asked a lot of our colleagues, what are you doing? And a lot of them were going to the auto attendant. I was like, there's just something about when you call up a number and you get a human being, even if they're going to route you to somebody else, the fact that you got a human being, it just matters, right?
It matters so much at our company, even when we grew to thousands of people, more than 5,000 full-time employees. And a lot of companies were having an auto attendant answer the phone. I thought, no, it's always got to be a human being. These clients and prospective clients want to speak to a human being. So absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Now, one of the things that you talk about in your book is ownership is a core value and a philosophy every entrepreneur and employee should embrace. Let's talk about ownership. Let's talk about what that means. And then let's talk about what it means to have it as a core value for your team.
Yes. Well, of course, as an entrepreneur, if you're an entrepreneur, or a person is going to act like the owner, and they need to more than anybody. They need to act like they're, the success of their company as if their life depends on it. I mean, they really do. They need to be all in. They need to be addicted, obsessed. And I really think that is critical in making sure you're a successful entrepreneur. But then, along with that, your employees, the kind of employees you want to hire are the people that act like owners. And you look for it in the interview. Do they seem like they would be that kind of employee who would treat the company as if they own it? It's a value that's inside of us too. And no matter what job we've had, whether we're, working in an ice cream store, or we're the CEO, do we act like the owner? And I think that is something that people kind of are born with, or they learn to understand very quickly. So that's what you want in your employees. And if your employees are acting as if they're owners, the sky's the limit. I mean, that's how you are going to build a billion-dollar company. I think that was so critical for us. We hired people who had that service mentality and that ownership mentality. And then we tried to incentivize them like owners by the way we paid them. But first and foremost, it's got to be the type of person you hire. And that's, absolutely critical.
Yeah. And I think too, what I found is as you're developing the culture of your organization is you got to make sure you don't squelch that creativity. When somebody does something a little bit outside of the norm, right? And it isn't exactly following your instructions as to what you said, being able to encourage them, like look at what was the heart behind it, and encouraging that innovation too, I think is really important too, because you don't want to slap someone's hands that's taking that step above, right? Because it means next time they're not going to do it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you want to encourage innovation, every day, every step of the way. And in my book, Dream Big and Win, I talk about that. I talk about how innovation is key in your employees and it's key in your leaders across the board. And we used to do things like innovation contests, or we used to make it so in order to be promoted to the next level, the employee would need to come up with an innovation. Or in surveys and exit interviews, we would say, and this was my favorite question, what would you do if you owned the company or if you ran the company? And that is how we got so many of our wonderful innovations and so many of our new products, our new services, our new technologies, our new systems that we offered were because of our people's ideas. So innovation is absolutely key.
And I love that you said that you would ask them, what are your ideas? I think sometimes, some people don't talk to their team like on a real level, but having that relationship, I wouldn't call it personal, but a relationship where they're used to talking to, right? And being able to ask them, hey, how would you do this better? Or why are you doing this faster than everybody else? Let me find out your secret sauce here so we can replicate this, is really important with that.
Absolutely. Yes. And that is another thing I talk about in my book, which is the importance of one-on-one meetings with the people that report directly to you, your direct reports, and then skip level meetings, if you can fit that in, because that's where you learn so many wonderful ideas, so many places, the innovations that you can implement. Another way of getting innovation is through your clients, those one-on-one meetings, the events, the dinners, the phone calls, the conversations with your clients. That is so much of how we got our innovations as well. So it's all about talking to people. And that's why, back to what we were saying about technology is wonderful. And I think it's great when it can repeat things that you don't need a human being to do, and things that can lower costs, can increase efficiency, increase consistency, increase quality, but clearly can be done by technology, but not what a human being can do. And so, yeah, innovation is the way that tends to happen. It's through conversations and incentives, as I was saying. So that's what I'd say about that.
I love it. So tell me, what is a skip level conversation? Let's clarify that for our listeners and viewers, just so they are clear on what that means.
So when I say skip level, I guess what I mean is short. What is so valuable and so important is when you meet with the people who report to you one-on-one. And if you can do that once a week or once every 2 weeks, wonderful. And you can give and get a lot of terrific feedback that way, but also doing it with the people who report to the people who report to you, or the people who report to the people who report to the people who report to you. And I think that is so, so important, because one thing I learned in exit interviews or in employee surveys that I thought was so important was often people will say, well, I love my boss, but I don't like senior management, or I don't like the company. And so that's why if you're speaking to people that are not reporting directly to you, but 2 levels from you or 3 levels to you, you can really learn a lot, and they can really understand where you as a leader are coming from. And it just makes for so much better an environment. So there's so much value in that. And also, these people are more likely to be on the front lines, and they have wonderful ideas, and they need to know you care.
Definitely. And, you have to make it part of your culture too. That's just something that you do, that you encourage, just those skip level conversations. I remember one time I went and talked to, it was like telemarketing staff. And I remember the manager getting upset, like, why are you talking to my people? And it was because she, it wasn't a part of the culture that she knew about. And so it's important to say, hey, when someone starts, sometimes we have these skip level conversations where we just come in and we'll ask about it. So really ingraining that so somebody doesn't think that you're walking over their head when you're having those conversations is really important. And you're right, you can absolutely learn a lot from talking to people that are on the ground and seeing what they're doing, because they're getting the nose, they're seeing what's working, and really that's where that juiciness comes from.
You're absolutely right. And I think it's so important, as you say, to set forth in the beginning when people start, or when people have been with you and you're talking to them about your culture. This is how we do it. I'll speak to people who report to you. And so they know you're not trying to step on their toes. And another thing that I used to do that I found so incredibly valuable is when a new person started, and this wouldn't just be a person reporting to me. As we got bigger, that person might be a couple levels from me. They were perhaps opening an office, which is very important. And it might be a one person office because that's how we started with our offices. But the idea was to grow it to 100 people. I would take them out to lunch when they were visiting our New York headquarters and really talk to them and really get to know them and talk about our culture, as we're saying, and find out what was important to them and what would motivate them. And I learned a lot, both as far as keeping that individual motivated and also employees in general and leaders in general motivated. So yes, those skip level meetings are incredibly valuable.
So tell me, you talked about paying and compensating your team as if they're owners. What does that look like? How do you set up that type of compensation structure that really mirrors how an owner would be compensated, which I'm assuming based upon performance?
Yes, very much so. And to the extent an entrepreneur or a leader can do that, I think there is so much value if they can do that. Like, for example, the key for us in building our company was bringing in the revenue, sales, sales, sales. So when bringing in a salesperson, what I tried to do and what I try to do now is pay the lowest possible draw that they're comfortable with, and then pay a high commission, a higher commission they would make elsewhere. And so then what happens is if they're not selling, they're not making a big draw. They're not complacent. They're not sitting back and saying, I can live off this. And they will be affected. By the same token, if they are selling, they're going to make more than they would at the competition, the other companies in your industry or in our industry, and really in potentially any industry. So it's incredibly valuable. The other piece of it is paying them so that the commission doesn't sunset, meaning the client they get in year one, when that client comes back 5 years later or 10 years later, they're still making that same percentage. The commission doesn't go down the longer the client has been with you or been with the company. And I think that is so valuable. And then the other thing I'd say is, even with people in production, which can be the biggest part of a company, finding a way to compensate them based on revenue and profit. And, I didn't mention with the salespeople also profit being a component, but the point is finding formulas, finding ways so that when the company does better as far as revenue and profit, the employees are affected in the same way. And that can be with respect to the work they're doing, their department's doing, and the company as a whole is doing. And the more systems and compensation plans you have set up like that, the more the employees really feel like they are on the same team. So I found that to be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, you never want to punish your sales team by lowering their commissions, right? That's one of the biggest demotivators and reasons why they would leave, right? If their pay is a lot less than what it was. And also you want to encourage clients to stay. You want to encourage longevity. And so if that salesperson can encourage that relationship to last longer, right? Because it's going to increase the asset value of your business, the better off. So reward them for that longevity.
Absolutely. And first of all, the employees without question deserve to be rewarded. And secondly, it can be 6 to 8 times more expensive to bring in a new client than to keep an old one. It's so much harder. So it works better for the company as well.
Now, I'm curious, Liz, does it take a special type of employee that is encouraged by having performance-based pay? Because, I have to be honest, I've seen some that are, and I've seen some that aren't. No matter how much you pay them, they're not going to be incentivized to work harder. So, how do you identify that person that's going to work for that type of model?
Yeah, that's a great question because some people are much more entrepreneurial and much more hungry as far as making the money than others, much more risk takers. And sometimes it's because they're ambitious. They want to make a lot of money. They want to make it to the top. Sometimes it's because they need to make more money. And I think the more you can suss out these types of issues in the interviewing process, the better. And that's why another thing I say, and I learned it from one of my wonderful mentor, Jack Daly, hire slowly, fire quickly, meaning really figure the people out as much as you possibly can before they hire them. Make sure for these positions that we're talking about where you are going to pay them as an entrepreneur would be paid, make sure that's what they want and they are motivated by that. In fact, I once interviewed a person to open and run one of our offices, and I told him how I intended to pay him, and he said, "You know what? That sounds like such a great plan. I will even do the job with no draw," because he liked the comp plan so much. So I thought, okay, he does have an entrepreneurial mindset. So the point is having the conversation before the person's hired, you can really, you know, you're likely to figure it out. And
And I
then,
like what you said too.
yeah. So yes, that's what I'd say.
With the fire quickly, hire slowly, and I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs mess up. They doubt themselves, or they want to give many chances. They don't want to have that awkward conversation of letting someone go, and so they end up having a team that they're not really excited about at the end of the day. So very good advice on that.
Yes, and I found as a rule, yes, another saying I've heard is it's not the employees you fired that give you the ulcers, it's the ones you keep that you should have terminated. And obviously none of us likes to terminate someone, but sometimes it's necessary. But another really interesting lesson I learned was there are some people who they seem great. They're curious, they're proactive, they're ambitious, they're all the things you want in an employee, but early on, they might make mistakes, whether it's, there are a number of different kinds of mistakes. I once had an employee, he was fabulous. Ultimately, in the early days, he was making mistakes in his correspondence. And sometimes that's a sign they'll never get it right. But in his case, he quickly turned that around. And then he ended up being a star leader at our company. If they respond well to the feedback and they quickly change it, that's great. So I had a few situations where they had the characteristics that you wanted that I was mentioning, but they were doing something wrong as performance. If you give them the feedback, they quickly change it, then they can at times be your stars. And I did have a few of those. So I always keep that in my mind, which is really the idea of giving very specific, constructive feedback early on. And as you said in one of your podcasts that I so agreed with, making clear the boundaries, making clear the guidelines so they understand at our company, this is how we have to do it. Can you change it? Yes or no? And if you can't, then yes, you have to terminate the person.
Right. And it's best for the person too, because now they can find a home where they're going to be happy at, right? Versus one that they're going to be under constant stress. It's never fun to be under constant stress every day.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that you talk about too is the key to motivating employees and taking personal stake in your people's success. Let's talk about the key to motivating employees. What's the best way to motivate your team to produce for you in their best way?
Yeah, I think hiring people in the first place that are very excited about your company and they think, wow, that sounds amazing, and I want to be a part of it. Sharing your vision with them and making sure they, are excited about the idea of being a part of it. That the industry excites them, that the company and the culture excites them. And then as far as keeping them motivated, talk about the purpose, why you're doing what you're doing. What's the why behind it? I mean, in our case, we're helping the world communicate. We are bringing the world together that way. And that was very exciting and rewarding. So getting people on board with the why and making sure they share that vision with the people that report to them. I think also lots of positive reinforcement and specific positive reinforcement. I'm a big believer in awards. We gave awards monthly. We gave awards at the summer parties and the winter parties and the domestic conferences and the international conferences, lots of awards based on the kind of behavior that you want people to carry out. And people were very motivated by those awards. And then they were public, which is nice because we tended to hire people who like public recognition. So I think that is incredibly valuable. Other incentive systems like president's clubs or platinum clubs, those are wonderful. And then really caring about them as people, right? I mean, I think you can do that and still expect great results. And that combination is absolutely key.
I love it. And, it always saddens me, and I think we've all kind of worked for those bosses, that don't praise enough. And it's sad because it's so inexpensive, right? It doesn't have to cost you anything. It can be as silly as like having like a crown or decorating someone's office door for a day, for a job well done. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it makes that person feel valuable, right? And it encourages certain behavior. So, if you're not out there motivating your employees every single day and just being just a light in their life, right? You're really missing out on bringing out the best in your team.
You're absolutely right. And you're right. It's an inexpensive way to motivate people. And it's probably the most important way to motivate people. Another perk that people liked was titles. Titles are cheap, right? And there's some companies that are so kind of frugal with the titles, right? They are not generous with the titles. And I think giving great titles is also very valuable. So I completely agree with what you're saying.
So Liz, as we wrap up today, one of the questions that I love to ask our guests is, if you could leave one piece of advice, it can be business, it can be personal, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, I think it's very valuable to build your dream, because if you're not, you're building someone else's, and it's exciting, it's rewarding. You can create your dream culture. You can dream big. And even when you dream big, maybe you don't accomplish your ultimate goal, but you're going to get pretty close. And then you win because it's been on your terms. So I highly recommend being an entrepreneur, or if not, at least being an intrapreneur within your company, because the people that are the entrepreneurs are the most valuable. And then they are going to do incredibly well in their company and in their careers. So that intrapreneurial mindset, I'm a fan. Go do it. Don't quit. And, create the life of your dreams. Dream big and win.
I love it. Now, Liz, what's the best way for our audience to reach you, to learn more, to get a copy of your book?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Suzanne. So the best way to reach me and connect with me is my website is lizelting.com. And I also have a foundation, which since I sold my company 5 years ago, I started called the Elizabeth Elting Foundation.org is the website. So lizelting.com and elizabetheltingfoundation.org. And then my book is on Amazon, Dream Big and Win on Amazon, or Barnes and Noble, or any other retailer that you like to buy from.
And what I'm going to do for you guys that are driving is I am going to put the links for Liz in the show notes, as well as where to order her book, so that you can check that out, read that book, learn more about creating this amazing company that really matches your dream. So thank you, Liz, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts and experiences.
Oh, thank you so much, Suzanne. I've loved meeting with you.